The arid heat of the Iraqi desert clung to Ryan Marshall's skin like a second layer, the relentless sun beating down on the forward operating base in Al-Anbar, where the 39-year-old staff sergeant with the 101st Airborne had been stationed. For 5 grueling months, his sandy blonde hair matted under his helmet, his deep blue eyes squinting against the glare as he trudged back to his tent after a long patrol. The weight of his gear nothing compared to the heaviness in his chest when he opened his laptop that evening in July 2024, expecting a message from his wife Sophia back home in Boise, Idaho. Instead, an email awaited him, its subject line a cold dagger. "It's over. Let's handle this maturely." Ryan's stomach churned as he clicked it open, the words blurring on the screen as he read Sophia's message, a mere 4 sentences that ended their 12-year marriage in a PDF attachment, divorce papers already filed, their joint account drained, to nothing, and her new boyfriend Owen already living in their suburban Boise home, a house Ryan had bought with his VA loan, a home where they'd planned to raise a family. The betrayal hit him like a mortar blast, his breath catching in his throat as he sat on the edge of his cot, the hum of the generator outside a dull roar in his ears, the distant laughter of his squad mates, a cruel contrast to the silence that now filled his world, his calloused hands trembling as he reread the email, each word a fresh wound. She'd taken everything, their savings, their memories, their future, leaving him with nothing but a digital goodbye while he was 7,000 miles away fighting for his country. Ryan's tentmate Torres, a wiry soldier from Texas, glanced over from his bunk, his dark eyes narrowing as he noticed Ryan's pale face. "You okay, Sarge? You look like you've seen a ghost." Ryan forced a nod, his voice hoarse as he muttered, "Just some news from home," and closed the laptop, the screen's glow fading like the life he thought he had, his mind racing with memories of Sophia, her chestnut hair catching the Boise sunlight, her laugh at the county fair. Where they'd met in 2011, the way she'd clung to him before his deployments, whispering promises of forever that now felt like lies. He stood, his boots heavy on the sandy floor, and walked to the communal showers, the lukewarm water doing little to wash away the ache in his chest, his deep blue eyes staring blankly at the tiled wall as he tried to process the betrayal, the humiliation of being discarded so callously while he was risking his life, the anger simmering beneath his shock, a quiet resolve forming in the depths of his pain. He wouldn't beg, he wouldn't break, but he would survive this, for himself, for the man he'd fought to become in the chaos of war, a man who knew how to endure, even when the enemy came from within his own home. 7 months before Ryan Marshall's deployment to Al-Anbar, the air in their Boise, Idaho home carried a subtle chill, not from the crisp Idaho spring, but from the growing distance between him and Sophia, a shift so gradual it crept into there. Marriage like frost on a window pane, unnoticed until it obscured the view entirely. The once warm suburban house on Maple Drive now feeling like a hollow shell despite its cozy exterior, pale blue siding, a small porch with a swing where they'd once watched sunsets, and a backyard where they'd dreamed of building a treehouse for the children they never had. Ryan, a 39-year-old staff sergeant with the 101st Airborne, stood in the kitchen that March morning in 2024, his sandy blonde hair still damp from a shower, his deep blue eyes scanning the room for signs of the woman he'd married. The woman who'd once filled their home with laughter, her chestnut hair catching the light as she'd dance around the island, making pancakes on Sundays. But now Sophia was a ghost in her own house, her presence marked by absence, her new routines a quiet rebellion against the life they'd built over 12 years. She'd started working late at the local veterinary clinic, where she handled the front desk, her shifts stretching into the night with excuses of inventory or new software training. Her phone now locked with a password. Ryan didn't. No? A small but sharp detail that gnawed at him as he watched her come home at 9 p.m., her hazel eyes avoiding his, her new floral perfume, a scent he didn't recognize, trailing behind her like a stranger's shadow, her gym bag slung over her shoulder though her sneakers looked untouched, her new wardrobe of sleek blouses and skinny jeans, a stark contrast to the cozy sweaters she used to wear. Ryan wasn't the type to snoop. He'd been raised by a father who valued trust, a Marine who'd taught him to face problems head-on. But he wasn't naive either, his military training sharpening his instincts, his gut whispering that something was wrong, a suspicion that grew with each unanswered question. Each girls' night with friends he'd never met, their names, Emily, Tara, tossed into conversations like afterthoughts, leaving Ryan to wonder who they really were. He sat on the couch one evening, the TV flickering with a Boise State football game he wasn't watching, his deep blue eyes fixed on the empty spot where Sophia used to curl up beside him, her absence louder than the crowd's cheers on the screen, his mind replaying the last time they'd truly talked, Christmas when she'd smiled faintly at his gift, a silver necklace with a heart pendant, but never wore it, her distance a silent wound that bled into every corner of their home. Ryan knew deployment was hard. 4 tours in Iraq and Syria had taught him that. But this was different. This was a slow unraveling, a betrayal brewing in the quiet moments. And so he acted with the precision of a soldier preparing for battle, not with confrontation but with precaution, his hands steady as he gathered their marriage license, his birth certificate, and the deed to their house, bought solely in his name with a VA loan, locking them in a storage unit across town near the Boise River, a nondescript grey building where he also stashed his late father's dog tags and his mother's pearl earrings, heirlooms too precious to lose. He opened a new account at a credit union downtown, diverting a portion of his military pay, $500 a month, small enough to go unnoticed, but enough to give him a lifeline if the worst came true, his deep blue eyes reflecting a storm of doubt and determination as he sat in his truck outside the bank, the engine idling, the weight of his actions settling into his bones, a man protecting what little he could from a threat he couldn't yet name, a threat that wore the face of the woman he'd vowed to love forever, a woman who now felt like a stranger in the home they'd once shared. In the dim light of his tent at the forward operating base in Al Anbar, Ryan Marshall sat motionless on his cot, the email from Sophia still open on his laptop, the words, "It's over," searing into his mind like a branding iron. The Iraqi desert, night pressing in around him with its oppressive silence, the distant hum of a Black Hawk helicopter, a stark reminder of the war he was fighting, while his personal life crumbled 7,000 miles away in Boise, Idaho, the betrayal a bitter pill that lodged in his throat, his deep blue eyes hollow as he stared. At the screen, the divorce papers in the PDF attachment, a cold, clinical end to a 12-year marriage he'd thought was unbreakable. At 39, Ryan, a staff sergeant with the 101st Airborne, had faced enemy fire, IEDs, and the chaos of 4 deployments, but nothing had prepared him for this, a digital dagger from the woman he'd loved since their first dance at the Boise County Fair in 2011, her chestnut hair swaying under the string lights, her hazel eyes sparkling with a promise of forever that now felt like a cruel joke, the memory twisting the knife deeper as he sat in the suffocating heat, his sandy blonde hair clinging to his forehead, his calloused hands gripping the edge of the cot as if it could anchor him against the storm of emotions raging inside. Shock, betrayal, and a quiet simmering anger that he fought to keep at bay, knowing that losing control in a war zone could cost lives, including his own. Torres, his tentmate, glanced over from his bunk, his dark eyes catching the tension in Ryan's. Rigid posture. "You sure you're good, Sarge? You've been staring at that screen like it's gonna bite you." His voice low but laced with concern, a rare crack in the stoic demeanor soldiers often wore like armor, and Ryan forced a tight smile, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. "Yeah, just some personal stuff, nothing I can't handle." The lie tasting bitter on his tongue as he closed the laptop, the screen going dark like the hope he'd held for his marriage, his mind racing with questions. How long had Sophia planned this? How could she move Owen into their home so quickly? And why now when he was at his most vulnerable, halfway across the world with no way to fight back? He stood, his boots scuffing the sandy floor, and walked outside. The desert air thick with dust as he leaned against a concrete barrier, his deep blue eyes tracing the stars above, the same stars he and Sophia had once gazed at from their porch. Swing in Boise, a memory that now felt like a lifetime ago, his heart aching as he recalled her last words at the airport before his deployment. "Stay safe, Ryan," her voice flat, her hazel eyes dry, a goodbye that lacked the warmth of a wife sending her husband to war. a sign he'd missed in his hope that their marriage could weather another storm. Ryan didn't cry. He hadn't since his father's funeral a decade ago. But the weight of Sophia's betrayal pressed against his chest like a physical force, his breath shallow as he forced himself to focus, his military training kicking in like a reflex, his mind shifting from grief to strategy, a soldier's instinct to survive even when the battlefield was his own heart. He returned to his tent, pulled out a small notebook and began to write. Call the bank, check the VA loan status, secure the storage unit, contact his sister in Boise for updates, a list of actions to take when the sun rose, a lifeline to keep him grounded, his deep blue eyes narrowing with a quiet resolve as he typed a one-word reply to Sophia's email, understood, and hit send. The single word a declaration of his refusal to beg, a promise to himself that he would endure this, just as he'd endured the chaos of war, a man broken but not defeated, a soldier ready to fight for the life he deserved, even if it meant facing the enemy he'd once called his wife. 3 weeks after Sophia's chilling divorce email, Ryan Marshall sat in the mess hall at the Al Anbar base, the clatter of trays and the low hum of conversation fading into a distant buzz as he stared at his phone, a notification from his banking app lighting up the screen with a gut punch of reality. Another withdrawal, $92,300, leaving their joint account at a pitiful $18.42. The savings account they'd built over a decade. $53,000 meant for a future that now felt like a mirage, completely wiped out, transferred to an unknown account in a series of transactions that began the day after Ryan deployed, each one a silent betrayal that echoed louder than the mortars he'd dodged in Iraq. At 39, Ryan, a staff sergeant with the 101st Airborne, felt the ground shift beneath him, his deep blue eyes narrowing as he set down his fork, the uneaten MRE on his tray, a testament to the nausea churning in his gut. His sandy blonde hair pushed back with a trembling hand as he opened the app, the numbers on the screen a cruel confirmation of Sophia's calculated move. She'd drained their life's work while he was risking his life. Her actions a cold, deliberate strike that left him reeling in the middle of a war zone, his chest tight with a mix of disbelief and a growing fury he fought to contain, knowing that losing focus here could be deadly. Torres, sitting across the table, noticed the shift in Ryan's demeanor, his dark eyes flicking up from his own meal. "Bad news, Sarge. You look like you're about to punch through the table." His voice steady but tinged with concern, and Ryan locked his phone, his jaw clenched as he muttered, "Just some financial stuff back home," the understatement burning in his throat. As he stood, the mess hall's fluorescent lights harsh against his pale face, his mind racing with the implications. Sophia wasn't just leaving him. She was erasing him, taking everything they'd built and handing it to Owen, the man now, living in their Boise home. That night, Ryan sat alone in his tent, the desert heat oppressive even after sundown, his laptop open as he accessed their home security system remotely, a precaution he'd set up before deployment that Sophia likely forgot about. The live feed, a window into the life she'd stolen. Owen's black SUV in their driveway, the man himself walking their golden retriever, Max, wearing Ryan's Boise State hoodie, a sight that sent a jolt of cold rage through him, his deep blue eyes burning as he watched Sophia laugh in the kitchen he'd remodeled 2 summers ago, her chestnut hair catching the light as she poured wine for Owen. The intimacy of the scene a dagger to Ryan's heart, each laugh a reminder of the life he'd lost, the betrayal now visual, undeniable, a wound that bled into every fiber of his being. Ryan's hands shook as he closed the laptop, his breath ragged, but his military training kicked in, channeling his anger into focus, his mind racing with a plan. He'd call the bank at first light, request a detailed transaction history, and reach out to his sister Hannah in Boise to check on the house, his deep blue eyes hardening with a resolve that cut through the pain. A soldier's instinct to fight back against an enemy he never thought he'd face, a woman he'd loved with every piece of himself, now a stranger who'd taken everything, leaving him to pick up the pieces in the middle of a desert, 7,000 miles from the home that was no longer his. In the pre-dawn stillness of the Al Anbar base, Ryan Marshall sat at a folding table in his tent, the faint glow of his laptop casting shadows on the canvas walls, the Iraqi desert outside cloaked in darkness as the first hints of sunrise painted. The horizon, A new day dawning with a mission far different from the patrols he'd led for the 101st Airborne. A mission to reclaim his life from the ashes of Sophia's betrayal. His deep blue eyes sharp with focus, despite the exhaustion etched into his features. His sandy blonde hair tousled from a sleepless night. His calloused hands steady as he typed an email to his old army buddy, Nathaniel Brooks, now a lawyer in Boise, Idaho, the subject line reading urgent legal advice needed. At 39, Ryan had survived 4 deployments, but the war he faced now was personal. The sting of Sophia's actions, draining their joint account, moving Owen into their home and filing for divorce via email, fueling a quiet determination that burned hotter than the desert sun. His mind racing with the evidence he'd gathered, the security footage of Owen and Sophia in their Boise kitchen, a haunting loop in his memory. Her laughter, a betrayal that echoed louder than any explosion he'd faced in combat, his heart hardening with each passing second as he refused to let her erase him without a fight. Nathaniel replied within hours, his response concise but reassuring. "Call me on a secure line at Uro 900 Boise time. We'll sort this out." Ryan waited until the designated hour. The base's communication center, a cramped room smelling of stale coffee and diesel. His deep blue eyes fixed on the satellite phone as he dialed, Nathaniel's voice a lifeline across the 7,000 miles. "I've seen the email, Ryan. She's playing dirty, but we can play smarter. First, we need to secure your assets. What's left of them." Ryan explained the steps he'd taken before deployment, moving the house deed, his birth certificate and family heirlooms to a storage unit, diverting part of his pay to a separate account. And Nathaniel's tone shifted to one of approval. "Good. That gives us a foundation. But there's more to dig into. She can't touch the house since the VA loan is in your name, but we need to check for any refinance attempts or liens." The word refinance sent a chill down Ryan's spine, a memory surfacing of Sophia mentioning it casually last year. "We could refinance the house, get some cash for a vacation," she'd said, her hazel eyes flickering with something he couldn't place at the time, a red flag he'd ignored in his trust, now a potential landmine as Nathaniel continued, "I'll pull the property records today. But there's something else. I've dealt with cases like this before. If she's moving this fast with this Owen guy, there might be fraud involved. We need to check your military pension accounts too, make sure she hasn't tried to access those." Ryan's jaw clenched, the idea of Sophia tampering with his pension, a benefit he'd earned through years of service, through sweat and blood in Iraq and Syria, igniting a fresh wave of anger, his voice low but firm. "Do whatever it takes, Nate. I want to know everything." Nathaniel outlined the next steps, filing for an emergency injunction to freeze any further financial moves by Sophia, requesting a detailed bank audit of the joint account transactions, and reviewing the VA loan terms to ensure the house remained in Ryan's name. His words a blueprint for battle that Ryan absorbed with the precision of a soldier planning an op. His deep blue eyes glinting with a resolve that had carried him through war, now turned toward a fight for justice, a fight to reclaim what was his, a fight against a woman he'd once loved, whose betrayal had turned their 12-year marriage into a battlefield of its own. 6 weeks after his call with Nathaniel Brooks, Ryan Marshall stepped off a military transport plane onto American soil at Mountain Home Air Force Base, just an hour's drive from Boise, Idaho, the crisp November air of 2024, a sharp contrast to the suffocating heat of Al-Anbar, his deep blue eyes scanning the tarmac as he adjusted the duffel bag on his shoulder, his sandy blonde hair catching the faint sunlight. A mix of exhaustion and determination etched into his features after 5 months of deployment, and a marriage shattered by Sophia's betrayal, her email divorce, the drained joint account, and Owen now living in their home, a betrayal that had fueled his every step since that fateful night in the desert. At 39, Ryan, a staff sergeant with the 101st Airborne, had requested emergency leave, his commanding officer granting it after hearing the gravity of his situation, the flight back a blur of restless sleep and strategizing with Nathaniel over encrypted messages, his heart pounding with a mix of dread and resolve as he rented a nondescript sedan under a friend's name and drove straight to Boise. Checking into a budget motel off I-84, the neon sign flickering in the dusk as he dropped his bag on the threadbare carpet, his deep blue eyes reflecting a steely focus. He wasn't here to confront Sophia, not yet. He was here to gather evidence, to build a case that would ensure she faced the consequences of her actions. Nathaniel met him the next morning at a diner on the outskirts of Boise, a quiet spot with formica tables and the smell of burnt coffee. The lawyer's sharp green eyes assessing Ryan as he slid into the booth. "You look like you haven't slept in a month," Nathaniel said, handing over a folder thick with documents, bank statements, property records, and a bombshell discovery, a refinance application on their house, filed 3 months ago with Ryan's signature forged, pulling out $280,000 in equity. Owen listed as a co-applicant despite his criminal record of 2 DUIs and a petty theft charge from 2022, a detail that made Ryan's blood run cold, his jaw clenching as he flipped through. "The papers. She forged my signature while I was deployed. Then drained our accounts and moved him in. She's been planning this for months," his voice low but laced with fury, the betrayal now a tangible web of deceit that stretched far beyond a simple affair. Nathaniel nodded, his tone measured. "This is fraud, Ryan. We've got her on forgery, and Owen's involvement makes it worse. His record ties him to shady financial dealings. I've already filed a police report and a motion to freeze the refinance funds. But we need more." Ryan drove to the county clerk's office that afternoon, his boots echoing on the linoleum floor as he filed paperwork to contest the refinance, citing fraud, and registered a formal notice to block any property changes without his presence, his deep blue eyes scanning the clerk's face for any sign of delay, his heart racing as he secured the first piece of his defense. A small victory. That felt like a lifeline in the storm of Sophia's betrayal. That evening, as he sat in his motel room, his phone buzzed with a text from Nathaniel. Owen had been pulled over that morning in Ryan's truck, a vehicle still in Ryan's name, driving on a suspended license from his DUIs, the police impounding the truck and finding stolen veterinary sedatives from Sophia's clinic in the glove box, a discovery that escalated the investigation into potential drug theft. Ryan's deep blue eyes widening as he read the message, the pieces of Sophia's deception falling into place like a house of cards ready to collapse, his resolve hardening. He was no longer just a betrayed husband. He was a soldier on a mission, gathering the evidence to bring down the woman who'd tried to destroy him, one calculated step at a time. The Boise morning was crisp and grey, the kind of late November day in 2024, where the sky hung low with the threat of snow, as Ryan Marshall sat in his rented sedan parked outside the county clerk's office, his deep blue eyes scanning the documents Nathaniel Brooks had handed him the day before, the forged refinance application on his house, a ticking time bomb of fraud. $280,000 pulled out with his signature faked, Owen listed as a co-applicant, a man with a criminal record now tied to the home Ryan had bought with his VA loan, a home meant for a future that Sophia had shattered with her betrayal. At 39, Ryan, a staff sergeant with the 101st Airborne, felt the weight of the past 5 months, Sophia's email divorce, the drained joint account, the security footage of her laughing with Owen in their Boise kitchen press against his chest, like a physical force. But the discovery Nathaniel shared over breakfast at the diner that morning turned his anger into something colder, sharper. A bank audit revealed $2,800 of the refinance money had been transferred to a man named Spencer Caldwell, a local real estate agent specializing in quick cash sales, a name Ryan had never heard, but one Nathaniel recognized from past cases. "He's worked with guys like Owen before," Nathaniel had said, his green eyes grim. "They target military families. Spouses deploy and they swoop in, convincing the partner to sell the house below market value, splitting the profits while the soldiers left with nothing." Ryan's jaw clenched, his deep blue eyes narrowing. As the pieces clicked into place, Sophia wasn't just leaving him for Owen. This was a calculated scheme, a predatory operation that had likely ensnared other military families, the realization hitting him like a punch to the gut, his hands gripping the steering wheel as he processed the scale of the betrayal, his mind racing with the implications. If Spencer and Owen had done this before, how many other soldiers had come home to empty houses, broken marriages, and stolen futures, their sacrifices on the battlefield mocked by vultures like these? Nathaniel leaned forward in the diner booth, his voice low. I dug deeper into Owen's history. He's got a pattern, 3 other cases in the past 4 years, all military spouses, all homes sold through Spencer's network, always the same. MO gain trust, push for a quick sale, disappear with the cash. Sophia might be a pawn or she might be in on it. We need to find out. Ryan drove to the bank that afternoon, meeting with a fraud investigator named Karen Holt, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, her desk cluttered with papers as she pulled up the refinance account records. Her voice, steady as she confirmed the transfers to Spencer, "This isn't isolated. We've seen similar patterns in other states. Idaho, Montana, Washington. It's a ring, and Owen's not the mastermind. Spencer's the one pulling the strings." Ryan's deep blue eyes burned with a mix of rage and clarity, his voice low. "What happens to the money?" Karen hesitated, then turned her screen. Toward him, showing a list of transactions. $12,800 as earnest money to Spencer, likely to list the house with additional transfers to an offshore account. "Half's already gone," she said, "but we've frozen what's left." Ryan's resolve hardened, his military training channeling his emotions into strategy. He called Nathaniel that evening. "We need to take this higher. Other families are at risk." Nathaniel agreed. "I've got a contact at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. This crosses state lines, involves military personnel, it's their jurisdiction." Ryan sat in his motel room that night, the neon sign outside casting a flickering glow through the blinds, his deep blue eyes staring at a photo of him and Sophia at the Boise County Fair, a memory now tainted by the web of deceit she'd woven, his heart heavy but his mind clear. This wasn't just about his pain anymore. It was about justice, for him, for the others, a fight he'd see through, to the end, no matter the cost. The Boise air was heavy with the scent of impending snow as Ryan Marshall stood outside the FBI field office on a chilly December morning in 2024, his breath visible in the frosty air, his deep blue eyes fixed on the building's glass doors, a mix of anticipation and exhaustion etched into his features after weeks of gathering evidence against Sophia. Owen and Spencer Caldwell, a predatory scheme targeting military families, uncovered through bank audits and Nathaniel Brooks' relentless digging, a scheme that had already stolen $12,800 of Ryan's refinance money and likely ruined countless other lives across Idaho, Montana, and Washington. At 39, Ryan, a staff sergeant with the 101st Airborne, felt the weight of his 12-year marriage's collapse. Sophia's email divorce, the drained accounts, Owen in their home, transform into a broader fight for justice, his resolve as unyielding as the Idaho winter, as he met with FBI agents Clara Bennett and Marcus Tate, their badges gleaming under the fluorescent lights of a stark conference room, the walls lined with maps and case files, the air thick with the gravity of the investigation. Agent Bennett, a sharp-eyed woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, laid out the case. "We've been tracking Spencer Caldwell for months. He's the linchpin of a multi-state fraud ring targeting military families. Your evidence, Ryan, the security, footage, the forged refinance application, the bank transfers, ties Owen to Spencer directly. It's enough to move." Ryan's deep blue eyes met hers, a flicker of satisfaction breaking through his exhaustion as he handed over the USB drive. With the footage from his Boise home, Owen and Sophia laughing in the kitchen, a scene that once broke his heart now a weapon in this fight, his voice steady. "There's more." Owen was caught with stolen sedatives from Sophia's vet clinic, could be tied to their operation. Agent Tate, a broad-shouldered man with a calm intensity, nodded. "That's a lead we'll follow. Drug trafficking adds another layer. Makes this a conspiracy, not just fraud." The agents recorded Ryan's statement, his words methodical. As he recounted the timeline, Sophia's distance, the email, the drained accounts, the refinance fraud, each detail a nail in the coffin of the scheme. His deep blue eyes burning with a quiet fury as he thought of the other families. Soldiers like him who'd come home to nothing, their sacrifices exploited by predators like Spencer and Owen. That afternoon, Nathaniel called with an update, his voice crackling with urgency. "FBI's moving in. Raided Spencer's office this morning. Got him on wire fraud, conspiracy, and attempting to sell your house under false pretenses. Owen's in custody, too, picked up at your house. They found documents linking them to 6 other cases. Ryan drove to his old neighborhood that evening, parking a block away from the house on Maple Drive, his deep blue eyes watching as FBI vehicles surrounded the pale blue siding he'd once called home, agents leading Owen and Spencer out in handcuffs, Sophia standing on the lawn, her chestnut hair whipping in the wind, her hands covering her mouth in shock, a scene that brought Ryan no joy but a cold sense of closure, his heart heavy with the wreckage of their marriage but his mind clear. This was justice not just for him, but for every family they'd preyed upon, a battle he'd fought from the deserts of Al Anbar to the streets of Boise, a soldier's fight that ended not with a ceasefire but with the truth. The Boise winter had settled in by January 2025, a blanket of snow covering the city, as Ryan Marshall stood on the porch of a small cabin just outside Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, a 2-bedroom retreat on 5 acres of pine-dotted land, the icy air biting at his cheeks as he watched the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, his deep blue eyes reflecting a quiet peace that had eluded him for months, his sandy blonde hair dusted with snowflakes as he held a mug of black coffee, the steam rising like a whisper of the new life he was building after the storm of Sophia's betrayal, her email divorce, the drained accounts, the fraud scheme with Owen and Spencer Caldwell that had targeted military families, a nightmare that had finally ended with justice served. At 39, Ryan, a staff sergeant with the 101st Airborne, had seen the federal case against Owen and Spencer wrap up swiftly. Owen sentenced to 7 years for fraud and conspiracy, Spencer to 10 for orchestrating the multi-state ring, their plea. Deals exposing 9 other military families they'd preyed upon, families whose stolen funds were now being recovered, thanks to Ryan's evidence, a small victory that brought a bittersweet satisfaction as he received a letter from a Navy spouse. In Spokane, her words simple but heavy. "You saved our home, thank you." Sophia, after claiming she was manipulated by Owen, agreed to a settlement, full restitution of the $92,300 she'd stolen, forfeiture of any claim to the house or Ryan's military pension, and a signed confession of the forgery in exchange. For no charges, a deal Ryan accepted with a heavy heart, knowing the woman he'd loved for 12 years was gone, her betrayal a scar that would never fully heal. The divorce finalized 6 months after that fateful email in Al Anbar, a clean break that left him free but hollow. Ryan sold the house on Maple Drive shortly after, the pale blue siding and porch swing holding too many memories of a life tainted by deceit, using the proceeds to buy the Coeur d'Alene cabin, a sanctuary far from the ghosts of his past, his deep blue eyes scanning the snow-laden trees as he thought of the future. Early retirement from the Army after 15 years of service, a decision made with a clarity he hadn't felt in years, his military pension enough to cover the basics, while he started a new venture, woodworking for locals, crafting tables and chairs in a small shed behind the cabin, his calloused hands finding purpose in the rhythm of the saw, a craft his father had taught him before passing a decade ago. He adopted a rescue dog, a husky named Kodiak, whose icy blue eyes matched the winter landscape, the dog's playful barks echoing through the pines as they hiked the trails each morning, a companionship that filled the silence Sophia had left. Behind, Ryan's deep blue eyes softening as he scratched Kodiak's ears, a smile tugging at his lips for the first time in months, a sign of healing in the quiet moments of his new life. One evening, as the cabin's wood stove crackled and the snow fell softly outside, Ryan pinned the Spokane letter to his fridge, a reminder that something good had come from the wreckage, his deep blue eyes tracing the words as he sipped his coffee, the weight of the past lifting just enough to let him breathe, to let him hope. A man who'd fought for his country, for justice, now fighting for himself, building a life that was his alone, untainted by betrayal, a life where the sunrise held promise, not pain. A new beginning in the heart of Idaho's winter, where Ryan Marshall could finally be at peace.